Have you ever stumbled upon a moment that completely changed your understanding of someone you thought you knew? A moment that blurred the lines and left you questioning everything? That's exactly what happened one quiet evening, turning an ordinary night into something deeply unexpected. Life has a peculiar way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary, and sometimes it catches you off guard when you least expect it. That's exactly what happened on a quiet evening. It wasn't the kind of day where you'd anticipate something extraordinary. But as I learned, life doesn't follow your plans. The house was peaceful, as it often was during the evenings. My stepson, Ethan, had returned home a little earlier than usual. His car parked neatly in the driveway. Ethan wasn't a boy anymore. At 21, he carried himself with a quiet confidence, though there was always a tinge of hesitation in his interactions with people. After setting down my briefcase and kicking off my heels, I noticed the faint hum of running water upstairs. My instinct told me Ethan was in the shower. It wasn't unusual. However, something in the air felt different. I tried to shake off the nagging feeling as I busied myself, setting down the keys on the kitchen counter and grabbing a quick sip of water. The evening was supposed to be uneventful. Just me, Ethan, and the comforting quiet of our home. My partner, Sarah, Ethan's mother, was away on a business trip and wouldn't be back until the next morning. It left the house feeling a little emptier than usual. As I ascended the stairs, I noticed the bathroom door was slightly ajar. The sound of running water grew louder. Curiosity tugged at me. A harmless glance, I thought, but what I saw left me frozen in place. Through the gap in the door, I could see Ethan standing at the sink, his back to me, shirtless with his shoulders slightly hunched. His hands moved deliberately, as if focusing on something, though I couldn't make out what it was. His jeans hung low on his hips, giving him an air of casualness that seemed uncharacteristic of him. Normally so reserved, Ethan was meticulous about privacy. An open door was almost unheard of. I hesitated for a moment. Should I knock, call out, close the door, and leave him be? Before I could decide, the door creaked as I shifted my weight. Ethan spun around in surprise, his eyes wide with panic. "Oh, I didn't know you were home," he stammered, fumbling to grab a towel and hide whatever he had been doing. His voice was shaky, his demeanor completely unlike the calm and composed young man I was used to. I didn't mean to intrude," I said quickly, averting my eyes as my cheeks burned with embarrassment. "I just heard the water and thought something might be wrong." His face turned a deep shade of red, and he looked down, the towel clutched tightly in his hand. "No, it's nothing," but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in the way he avoided eye contact, the way his shoulders slumped as if carrying an invisible weight. I hesitated, my hand still resting on the edge of the door. Part of me wanted to leave him to his privacy, but another part, a stronger, more insistent part, felt compelled to ask. "Ethan," I said softly, stepping into the bathroom just enough to close the door behind me. "If something's wrong, you can tell me. I promise I won't judge." He froze, his grip on the towel loosening slightly. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer, but then he let out a shaky breath and sat down on the edge of the bathtub. "It's kind of embarrassing," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I leaned against the counter, keeping my posture relaxed to put him at ease. "You don't have to tell me if you're not comfortable," I said gently, "but sometimes it helps to talk about it." He nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the floor. "It's just, I've been dealing with something, and I didn't know who else to talk to." His vulnerability caught me off guard. Ethan had always been so independent, so self-reliant. The fact that he was turning to me, someone he barely spoke to about personal matters, felt significant. "Oh, what is it?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral and encouraging. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's about my body. Something's not normal, and I don't know if it's something to worry about or if I'm just overthinking." His words came out in a rush, like he had been holding them back for too long. I felt a pang of sympathy for him. It must have taken a lot of courage to say even that much. "Well," I said, choosing my words carefully, "you're not alone. Everyone has questions like that at some point, and it's good that you're paying attention to your health. Do you want me to help you figure out?" He glanced up at me, his expression a mixture of relief and hesitation. "You wouldn't mind?" "Of course not," I said, offering a reassuring smile. "We can handle this together." As we began to talk, the initial awkwardness started to fade. Ethan explained his concerns in halting sentences, his words punctuated by nervous glances at the floor. I listened patiently, offering reassurance and practical advice where I could. As Ethan spoke, the weight of his concerns became increasingly clear. His voice trembled with every word, a sign of just how long he had kept these thoughts bottled up. The bathroom, warm and filled with the scent of soap, seemed like an unlikely setting for such a raw conversation. But in that moment, it was the only place in the world that mattered. I guess I just don't know if it's normal," Ethan said, fidgeting with the edge of the towel. "I mean, there's no manual for this stuff, right? And Mom, well, she's not exactly the person I want to ask." His words hung in the air, the unspoken truth behind them cutting through the awkwardness. Ethan and Sarah had a good relationship, but there was always a layer of distance, a barrier neither of them seemed to know how to cross. "I get it," I said softly, leaning against the sink. "Sometimes it's hard to talk about things, even with the people closest to you, but you're doing the right thing by bringing it up. It's better than keeping it all inside." He nodded, though his expression remained clouded. I don't want to seem weird or—" "Ethan," I interrupted gently. "Everyone feels like that at some point, trust me. You're not weird. You're brave for even bringing it up." His lips twitched into the faintest smile, and for a moment, I thought the tension in his shoulders might ease, but it was clear that he still had more on his mind. "I've been feeling like I don't really know myself anymore," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like I don't fit in anywhere, and I don't know what's wrong with me." The vulnerability in his words hit me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about a physical concern. It was something deep, something that had been gnawing at him for a long time. "Ethan," I said after a moment of thought, "there's nothing wrong with you. You're figuring things out, and that's okay. Nobody has all the answers, especially not at your age." He glanced up at me, his eyes searching mine for reassurance. "You really think so?" "I know so," I replied firmly. "And no matter what, I'm here to help you. We'll figure this out together." For the first time, Ethan's posture relaxed ever so slightly. He leaned back against the wall, the towel still clutched in his hands, and let out a deep breath. "It's just, I've never talked about this stuff before. I didn't think anyone would understand. Sometimes we don't give people enough credit," I said with a small smile. "You'd be surprised how understanding they can be if you give them a chance. But it's also okay to be selective about who you open up to. Not everyone needs to know everything." He nodded again, this time with more confidence. "Yeah, I guess that makes sense." The conversation shifted after that, moving away from the heavy weight of his initial concerns and toward more practical matters. I offered what advice I could, drawing from my own experiences and knowledge. I kept my tone light, careful not to make him feel judged or uncomfortable. As we talked, I noticed a change in Ethan. The guardedness that usually surrounded him seemed to fade, replaced by a tentative openness. It was as if he was finally allowing himself to be seen, not just by me, but by himself as well. Throughout the conversation, I saw his tool growing when he looked at me, which I tried to ignore, but I can't deny it kind of excited me as it was really big. I helped wash it and sometimes held it because I needed to, but at those moments, I would exactly rather hold it, make it go up and down, and even, I don't know what I was thinking, but I knew this wasn't my last time holding it. After what felt like hours, the conversation began to wind down. The tension that had filled the bathroom earlier was gone, replaced by a sense of calm. Ethan looked at me, his expression a mixture of gratitude and relief. "Thanks," he said softly. "I didn't think I'd ever be able to talk about this with anyone." I smiled, reaching out to gently pat his shoulder. "I'm glad you did. And remember, you can always come to me if you need to talk about anything, no matter what. I'm here for you." He nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'll remember that." As I stood to leave the bathroom, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I was relieved that Ethan had opened up to me and that I had been able to help him. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, that there was more to his struggles than he was letting on. The evening passed quietly after that. Ethan retreated to his room, and I found myself sitting alone in the living room, a cup of tea in my hands. As I replayed the conversation in my mind, it was rare for Ethan to open up to anyone, and the fact that he had chosen me felt significant, but it also left me with a lingering sense of unease. What if there were more things he was struggling with? And what if I wasn't equipped to help him? The question swirled in my mind as the hours ticked by. Eventually, I forced myself to go to bed, though sleep didn't come easy, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on me. But even as doubts crept in my mind, one thing was certain: I would do everything in my power to be there for Ethan, no matter what. Little did I know, the events of that evening were just the beginning. The next few days unfolded with a strange, almost tangible tension that lingered in the air. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Ethan was still going about his routine, working part-time at a local cafe, spending time in his room, and avoiding the heavier topics we had touched upon. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, something I couldn't quite define, but could certainly feel. I tried to act as though everything was fine. After all, Ethan had opened up to me, and I had done my best to reassure him that things would be okay. But there were moments, little things, that kept catching my attention. I'd see him retreat into himself, his eyes avoiding mine when we passed in the hallway, or the way his shoulders would tense whenever I tried to make small talk. It was as if he was retreating into a world that I couldn't access. One he hadn't let me in on. At dinner one evening, as we sat at the table in silence, I caught him looking at me out of the corner of his eye. Our gazes met for a fraction of a second before he quickly looked away, his cheeks flushing. It was a fleeting moment, but it left me with a strange, unsettled feeling, like there was something unspoken hanging between us. I tried to brush it off, but it wasn't easy. The connection we had, whatever it was, seemed to be shifting into something undefined, something I wasn't sure I understood. Sarah came home that night, her usual cheerful self, and we settled into our nightly routine. But even with her presence, something still felt off. Ethan was quieter than usual, and I couldn't help but notice how his eyes would drift toward me during the evening, only to quickly look away when I caught him. It was subtle, but it was there. The next day, when Sarah had gone to work, I found myself alone in the house with Ethan. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when I heard the soft sound of footsteps behind me. I turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway, his posture hesitant. I greeted him, trying to keep my tone light. "Everything okay?" He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I just wanted to talk." A small knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. This was it, this moment that had been hanging in the air between us for days. I set down the knife I had been using and turned to face him fully. "What's on your mind, Ethan?" I asked, my voice calm despite the nervous fluttering in my chest. He hesitated, shifting from one foot to the other, as if debating whether to speak or not. I've been feeling kind of strange lately," he began, his words slow and measured, as if choosing them carefully. "I don't really know how to explain it, but something's been bothering me, something I can't quite put my finger on." I gave him my full attention, watching as his eyes drifted to the floor, avoiding mine. "You know you can talk to me, right?" I said softly. "If something's bothering you, I'm here." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he let out a long, drawn-out breath, as if bracing himself for whatever was coming. "I just don't know what's happening to me," he said finally, his voice thick with uncertainty. My heart ached for him. I could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the same uncertainty that had clouded his expression the first time we talked. The Ethan standing in front of me now was different from the one I had known before. There was a weight on him, an invisible burden that he seemed unsure how to carry. "It's okay," I said gently, walking over to him and placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to know everything right away. Sometimes we don't have all the answers, but we can figure it out together." He looked at me, then his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and something else I couldn't quite place. There was a raw honesty in his gaze, one that made me feel like I was seeing the real Ethan for the first time. "I've been feeling lost," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper, like I don't know who I am anymore or where I fit in. I know I'm not a kid anymore, but sometimes I feel like I don't know how to grow up, like I'm stuck. The honesty of his confession hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just a question of physical changes or awkwardness. Ethan was grappling with something deeper, something emotional. I think a lot of people feel that way, Ethan, I said softly, squeezing his shoulder reassuringly. It's not easy to figure everything out all at once, but you don't have to do it alone. You've got me, and you've got your mom. We're here for you. He met my gaze, then his expression softening, though a flicker of uncertainty still lingered in his eyes. I know, I just don't want to burden anyone with my problems. You're not a burden, I reassured, my voice firm. You never will be. We're family, and when things get tough, we stick together. He nodded slowly, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly, as though my words had given him some small measure of comfort. For the rest of the afternoon, Ethan seemed more relaxed. He stayed in the kitchen, helping me with the dishes and chatting about trivial things, his usual reserve replaced by a tentative openness. It was the first time in days that he seemed like the Ethan I had known, a little less guarded, a little more at ease. But even as he smiled and laughed, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more he wasn't telling me. The weight in his eyes hadn't fully lifted, and I knew this conversation, though important, was just the beginning. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything that had happened. Ethan had opened up to me more than he had in years, and yet I still felt like there was more to discover. There was a part of him that I hadn't reached yet, a part that he wasn't ready to share, but one thing was clear: I was committed to helping him, no matter how long it took or how difficult the journey became. This wasn't just about physical health or awkward questions. It was about helping Ethan find his way in the world, supporting him as he navigated the complicated terrain of growing up, and as the days went on, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together, and that was just the beginning. The days following our conversation felt like a delicate balance. Ethan had been more open, and I could sense that he was starting to feel lighter, as though he had let a burden go. But even with his improved demeanor, there was still a sense of hesitation in the air, something unspoken that lingered between us, almost like a secret waiting to be unveiled. As the week passed, I found myself wondering what would come of our conversations and whether Ethan truly felt like he could open up fully. He trusted me with so much, and I felt a deep responsibility to be there for him, to continue offering support as he navigated through his inner turmoil. But there was more, something I couldn't quite pinpoint, and I felt it whenever I looked into his eyes. There were moments when it seemed like he was teetering on the edge of something significant, something that would change everything. One evening after dinner, Ethan seemed more distant than usual. He had barely spoken throughout the meal, his responses to my questions short and distant. I glanced at him several times, but he was always looking away, as though he were lost in his own thoughts. After dinner, while Sarah retreated to the living room to watch TV, I found myself standing in the kitchen, trying to busy myself with the dishes. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was then that Ethan appeared in the doorway again, his expression unreadable. His eyes, usually full of hesitation, were now darker, clouded with something I couldn't understand. My heart skipped a beat as I turned to face him, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "Ethan," I asked softly, trying to keep my tone neutral, though the concern in my voice was hard to hide. "Is everything okay?" He nodded, but didn't move to enter the room. There was a long silence as we stood there, and I could feel the weight of his emotions hanging between us. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Ethan said, his voice low, almost hesitant, "and about what you said about being here for me." He paused, then took a step closer, his face tense. "I think, I need to talk to you about something else. Something I haven't been able to figure out." My pulse quickened at his words. I stepped forward, my heart heavy with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Of course, Ethan, whatever it is, we'll talk through it. You don't have to carry it alone." He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I had come to associate with moments of vulnerability. It's not easy for me to say this, he began, his voice shaking slightly, but I need to tell you something. It's been eating at me for a while now, and I don't know who else to turn to. I stood still, my breath catching in my throat. Whatever it was, I could sense it was significant. I didn't want to push him, but I wanted to be there for him. So I simply nodded, encouraging him to go on. He paused, his eyes flickering toward the floor before meeting mine again. I don't know how to explain this, but I've been feeling different about you. The words hung in the air, so heavy and unexpected that they took me by surprise. I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. Different, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. My heart racing. What do you mean, Ethan? He swallowed hard, his jaw tightening as he fought to keep his composure. I've been feeling confused, he said. I've been questioning a lot of things about myself, and I think I might have feelings for you. I don't want to say it out loud because I didn't know if it was just me being messed up, but the more I've thought about it, the more it feels real. His confession left me frozen in place. I stared at him, unsure of how to react. His words were a blur in my mind as I tried to process what he was saying. My heart raced, and my mind was in overdrive, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. This wasn't what I had expected. It wasn't what I had prepared for when I had promised to be there for him. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw the raw honesty and desperation. Ethan wasn't asking for anything. He was just trying to make sense of what he felt. And in that moment, I realized that he needed someone who would listen without judgment, without fear, but still, I can't deny, it was also a sense of relief for me as I thought back of the size of his tool back in the bathroom. I had been thinking about a lot, and every time it came up in my mind, I got excited. I took a slow, steady breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. Ethan, I said softly, my voice trembling slightly, I'm so glad that you came to me, but I need you to know something. I paused, searching for the right words. You're not messed up. You're just going through something that's confusing, and it's okay to feel lost sometimes. But I need you to understand that what we're talking about, it's complicated. This situation is complicated. He nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and relief. I know. I just didn't know who else to talk to, and I didn't want to carry this anymore. His voice cracked slightly, and I could see the vulnerability in him. This wasn't about desire. This was about confusion, about finding a safe space in a world that had suddenly become overwhelming. I took a step toward him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Ethan, I said, my voice steady but full of empathy, I will always be here for you, but this situation is something that requires careful thought. What you're feeling, it's okay, but we need to navigate this slowly. I can't give you what you want in the way you might be hoping for right now, and I don't want to lead you down a path that could hurt both of us. He looked at me, his lips trembling, as if waiting for me to pull away or tell him to leave, but I didn't. I just stood there, trying to offer him comfort in the only way I knew how. I'll always be someone you can talk to, but we need to figure out what this means without rushing into anything. But then something shifted in me. I thought of myself, why did not give in to what he was asking for? I mean, it was also exciting me, so why not? Without hesitating once again, I put my hand around his neck and kissed him. He kissed me back, and it was a long kiss. It was as if a bomb of desire, not only in him, but also in me, exploded. I'm sorry to give you all this confusion, Ethan, I said while pausing for a second. It doesn't matter. This is amazing, he replied without hesitating. I stopped kissing him and went down. I did the thing that I wanted to do since the moment in the bathroom. While I was busy and looked up, I saw he was enjoying this. This is amazing, he mumbled. After I think 10 minutes, I noticed he was reaching his end, so I went faster and faster, and then it happened. For a long time, neither of us said anything. There was a long silence, the weight of his words hanging between us. Slowly, Ethan took a deep breath, and his shoulders relaxed, as though he had been holding his breath for far too long. Thank you, he whispered, for this. I needed that. You're welcome, I said, my voice soft, my heart aching with a mixture of emotions. And remember, you don't have to figure everything out at once. You're not alone in this. After a moment, Ethan nodded and stepped back, a faint smile appearing on his face. I'm gonna head upstairs, he said quietly. Thanks again. I think I'll sleep better tonight. Good night, Ethan, I said, watching him retreat up the stairs. A small weight lifted from his shoulders, but as I stood there in the kitchen alone again, I couldn't shake the sense of change that hung in the air. I knew this moment was pivotal. It was a turning point in our relationship, one that could lead to healing or something more complicated. The following days passed in a strange quiet. There was a shift in the atmosphere at home, subtle but undeniable. Ethan had become more withdrawn again, but not in the same way as before. It wasn't a coldness or a distance that I could easily pin down. It was almost as if he was still processing everything we had talked about, trying to make sense of what he felt and how to move forward. There were moments when he seemed lost in thought, staring off into space, his fingers absently tracing patterns on his jeans or his coffee cup. I tried not to press him too hard. I knew this was something he had to work through on his own, at his own pace, but it wasn't easy. As much as I wanted to respect his space, I also wanted to reach out to help him, to make sure he didn't feel alone. I couldn't ignore the way he seemed to carry a weight with him, how his usually bright eyes now had a far-off, distant look. One afternoon, as I was in the living room, I caught a glimpse of Ethan walking past the hallway. His shoulders were slumped, his head down, and there was a heaviness to his steps. It was subtle, but spoke volumes. I could tell something was bothering him, something more than what we had already talked about. Without thinking, I stood up and walked toward him, finding him at the foot of the stairs. He looked up as I approached, surprised by my sudden appearance. "Ethan," I said softly, "can we talk for a moment?" He hesitated, looking as though he might retreat back to his room. But then he nodded slowly, as if giving into something inside him that wanted to be heard. We walked into the living room, and he sank onto the couch, looking at me with a mix of apprehension and expectation. I know it's been a little while since we talked. I began sitting down beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "But I can tell something's still on your mind. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but I want you to know I'm here for you." He didn't say anything at first, just stared ahead, his jaw tense. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed heavily and turned to face me. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about how we're family," he began, his voice so small, almost unsure, "and I keep asking myself if I'm overthinking things. I don't know how to stop feeling like this, like I'm trapped in my own mind, like what I feel isn't right." I could hear the frustration in his voice, and I could see it in his eyes. Ethan had always been someone who tried to keep his emotions contained, even when they were overwhelming him. It was as if he thought if he didn't talk about them, they might disappear, but I knew better. Emotions don't disappear. They linger, sometimes growing stronger until they can no longer be ignored. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," I said gently. "What you're feeling is real, and it's okay to feel confused, to feel lost. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you're human. We all have moments like that." He looked at me, his expression still uncertain, but he nodded slowly. "I don't want to make things weird between us," he said quietly, as though the words themselves caused him discomfort. "I don't want to feel like I'm crossing a line or like I'm being too much, but at the same time, I don't know who else to talk to." My heart broke for him. I could see how much he was struggling to understand himself, to make sense of the feelings that seemed to be pulling him in different directions. And in that moment, I realized something important. He wasn't looking for answers from me. He was looking for validation, for the reassurance that his emotions, his confusion, were okay to feel. "Ethan," I said, my voice steady, "you're not crossing any lines. You're not too much. You're just someone who's trying to figure things out, and that's completely normal. What you feel doesn't make you bad or wrong. It just makes you human." He swallowed hard and looked down at his hands, clearly lost in thought. I could tell he was still processing everything I'd said, trying to reconcile it with his own inner turmoil. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever stop feeling this way," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like if I'll ever be sure of who I am. I don't know if that's normal." I leaned forward slightly, making sure he knew I was fully present. "Ethan, it's okay not to have all the answers. You're in a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But you'll get there, and you don't have to do it alone." For a long time, we sat in silence, The only sound between us the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant rustle of wind outside. There was something cathartic about that silence, something healing. Ethan didn't need me to solve his problems. He just needed me to be there, to listen, and that was enough. "I appreciate you," he said, his voice breaking the silence. "More than you know. I didn't think I'd be able to talk about this with anyone, but you've made me feel like I'm not crazy. Like what I'm feeling isn't something to be ashamed of. You don't have to thank me," I said quietly, giving him a small smile. "I'm just glad you trust me enough to talk about it. And remember, you're never crazy for feeling the way you do. I'm always here, Ethan, no matter what." That evening, after we had spent some time talking, Ethan seemed calmer, though there was still a quiet sadness in his eyes. It wasn't that he had found all the answers he was looking for, but for the first time in weeks, he seemed to believe that maybe he wasn't so alone in his confusion. Over the next few days, Ethan continued to open up bit by bit, and with each conversation, the weight on his shoulders seemed to ease just a little. It wasn't a fast process, but it was progress. He no longer seemed as distant or trapped in his own head. And though I knew there was still much he had yet to understand about himself, I was confident that he was on the path toward finding that understanding. One evening a few weeks later, as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan turned to me with a soft smile. "Thanks," he said simply, his voice filled with a quiet gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "You don't have to thank me," I replied. "I'm just glad you found your way." And with that, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. There would be more moments of uncertainty, more questions to be answered, but I also knew that the bond between us, one built on trust, respect, and understanding, was strong enough to weather anything. If you resonated with Ethan's journey of self-discovery and unexpected connection, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to LGBT Stories for more emotional and heartfelt stories just like this one. And tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced a moment that changed everything? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching.